Revelation 1902. From the 30th of April 1941. Fight of the spiritual to guide man into recognition. The transmissions from above can only be grasped in their full depth when a certain spiritual aspiration of the human being becomes noticeable. There are infinitely many people who are strangers to spiritual experience, and therefore an inner rejection of these transmissions will be the first manifestation, for two worlds are still wrestling against each other here. That is, the inhabitants of each world seek to gain supremacy over the human soul. This can be an easy struggle if the inclination towards one world is not very great, but it can also mean a tremendous inner struggle for the soul if the soul has certainly partially overcome the desire for the earthly world but the spiritual realm is still completely foreign to it. Then the battle of the essence of both realms is a very fierce one, for the soul itself is still too undecided. It does not want to completely decide in favor of the earthly world because it recognizes the decrepitude, the transitoriness of everything that surrounds it. The spiritual kingdom, however, is not credible enough for it, and God's adversary uses all means to further strengthen its unbelief, for he will always harass the soul where it is weak and vulnerable. And therefore those people will find it difficult to recognize, they will often not want to and not be able to find the transition from earthly to spiritual experience. For the evil power will present them with more appealing images which seem more desirable to them and they will overlook the narrow paths which lead to recognition. And then the transmissions from above will also be powerless and ineffective, for spiritual things want to be looked at with spiritual eyes, spiritual truths want to be received with the heart and the spiritual ear. If they are not to remain without impression, if the human being wants to pray in his adversity, if he wants to submit his inner doubts and questions to God for an answer, the decision would be easier for him, for then he would grant access to those forces which guide him into realization and lead him into spiritual experience. But mostly the human intellect alone is active, but the heart is switched off. And now the human being sees through a mist. A mirage is feigned to him by the forces of the underworld. His power of judgment is weakened, he stretches out his hand longing for that mirage and passes by the fresh clear spring of knowledge without refreshing himself. And the human being does not know what wonderful strength this source contains. And he will not be able to feel this strength in himself until he desires to ascend of his own accord, until he recognizes everything earthly as void and worthless and leaves himself without resistance to those good forces which come from the spiritual realm and can therefore only offer him spiritual gifts. Only then will he pay attention to such gifts, only then will he be able to grasp how graciously God gives to people on earth in order to make the path upwards easy for them, to eternal beatitude. Amen.